this will be a rough one. Hey y'all, today we're looking at the new Lil Uzi Vert album, Eternal Atake. Lil Uzi Vert is a popular trap rap artist, and this new album of his has been crazy anticipated for a pretty long time. This thing was hyped up like crazy, as it's his first project since 2017. So is this thing worth the hype? Also, little note, I'm only going to be looking at the standard release of this album, because I wrote this script and worked on a lot of this video before Love vs. the World 2 came out. Okay, cool, thanks, love you. Let me get this out of the way. I am not the world's biggest fan of this genre. Granted, I don't automatically dismiss anything that comes out from this style like a lot of people do, and I do quite enjoy quite a bit of newer trap music. I do feel that this genre gets a little too much unjust hate, but even I admit that a considerable portion is pretty annoying, soulless, and can be painfully generic more times than not. And this album unfortunately falls prey to this in my opinion. This whole thing is an hour long, yet it somehow feels much longer. Each track feels painfully similar and generic, and barely anything is done to differentiate Uzi from his competition on this project. It wasn't a super harsh listen the first time through, but it was painfully difficult to come back to. Throughout the project, there are a few vocal skits at the end of some of the tracks, and they're fine. More or less than half a minute long, so they don't take up a huge bulk of time. It is really nice to have this album at least trying to go for little concepts throughout it, but they don't really work super well most of the time. They seem to be wanting to follow Uzi through some weird journey that I guess he wasn't really expecting. But 95% of the skits are just him going, "Oh, what the fuck," a bunch. And I wouldn't mind this too much if it suited the music well, but it just doesn't. This album doesn't even try to go for a spacey, adventurous feel outside of the skits. The lyrics are just dead ringer, stereotypical trap rap lyrics, and only a couple instrumentals even slightly work. The album just doesn't go all the way with this concept, and it would be so much better if it did. The beat on the track Pop is pretty interesting, and while it gets a little old, I feel like this is the only one that really fits the whole theme Uzi was clearly going for with the skits and cover art here. But even then, lyrically, it's still boneless as hell. Every single song feels much too long as well. They all just feel so stretched out, and I honestly had a pretty difficult time paying attention throughout this record. It was all just in one ear and out the other. No tracks were really that memorable or unique. With how much time apparently was going into this album, there isn't a ton of creativity to show for it here. This is normally the part of the review where I go through track by track and analyze them more closely, but there's barely anything to even look at. One positive thing I will say is that the transitions between tracks are done really well for the most part, especially in songs with skits. I just wish the skits themselves worked into the actual songs a lot better than they do lyrically. One standout track was You Better Move, but Christ, this song annoyed me. The hook is pretty awful and annoyingly repetitive, even more so than most other tracks here. The song Prices is equally as annoying vocally, but a somewhat interesting beat kept it from being one of the worst moments here. The trend of Uzi's poor vocal performance is pretty common here too, and while it's far from my least favorite aspect of the album, it can bog down some otherwise tolerable songs. His vocal performances range from being generic to just flat out irritating. Examples of this are pretty evident from the previously mentioned Prices, along with most of the songs in the first half, and quite a few in the second as well. The sole feature of this album is Sid, who appears on the song Urgency. While it is a pretty generic feature for the most part, the guest vocals are a breath of fresh air after hearing Uzi's dry and bored voice track after track. The song Venetia? Something like that. Has some pretty cringeworthy lyrics too. They're hard to stomach throughout this whole album, but here especially. The closer starts out as one of the more tolerable tracks for the simple reason that it almost starts to feel different from the rest. Until maybe the most generic beat of the entire album comes in, accompanied by some awful singing. This song gave me hope in the beginning that it was something interesting, but very quickly made me realize that this hope was very misplaced. I'm sorry this review was so short and repetitive, but I really have nothing else to say about this album. Every song just feels soulless, generic, and so much longer than it had to be. I know a lot of other people are super into this record, and hey, that's totally cool. Obviously, you can jam out to whatever you want to. This just isn't one I'll be returning to anytime soon, by my own choice at least. Feeling a pretty light 3 on this album. It's pretty soulless and uncreative, but definitely not the most offensive thing in the world. Hey, thanks for watching my review. What did you think of this album? Remember, just because your opinion is different than mine doesn't make it any less or more valid. This is just my take. What's yours? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.